It began on an ordinary night, the kind that passes unnoticed in small towns. Streetlights hummed above the quiet stretch of Lancaster Boulevard, their glow flickering over parked cars and empty sidewalks. The world seemed still, too still. Yet, inside one small apartment tucked along that street, something unspeakable was already in motion. A single light burned past midnight. Neighbors later remembered hearing faint noises, a dull thud, maybe a muffled cry, then nothing, just silence. Hours later, a figure was seen moving through the darkness, dragging something heavy with slow, deliberate effort. Whoever he wasn't rushing. He was executing a plan. By dawn, the apartment that once echoed with the laughter of 3 small children had fallen silent. The curtains were drawn, the door was locked, and the woman who had spent years trying to protect herself and her sons had vanished. What happened inside a home on the early morning of August 10th would unravel into one of Lancaster's most chilling cases, a story of control, obsession, and a desperate man's final act when he realized a woman he owned was slipping from his grasp. When Sheyla Lisbeth Cabrera left Peru, she carried more than a suitcase. She carried hope, the fragile kind that blooms only in people who believe that life can start over. The United States was her fresh beginning, a promise of safety and a future for her 3 sons. She dreamed of giving them everything she never had: peace, stability, and the freedom to grow. At 33, Sheyla had built that dream piece by piece. In Lancaster, California, she was known as a devoted mother, always seen with her boys, 9, 6, and 4 years old. She worked tirelessly, sometimes taking extra shifts just to make sure there was food on the table, and birthdays didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors spoke of her warmth, her quiet kindness. She was a woman who remembered your child's name, who shared her cooking when money was tight, who smiled even when exhaustion shadowed her face. Her small apartment on Lancaster Boulevard was filled with the colors of home, family photos, children's drawings, and the faint scent of the Peruvian dishes she grew up with. Despite her struggles, she created joy. She made her world beautiful. But behind that fragile peace, something darker was festering. Her husband, Josemar Cabrera, wore the mask of a charming family man. He smiled at barbecues, played the part of devoted father, and looked like stability itself. But those who truly knew Sheyla, the few she trusted, sensed a different story. Before they ever left Peru, she had already gone to police once, filing reports that spoke of bruises, fear, and nights she wished she could forget. Her mother back in Lima would later confirm the truth. Josemar had hit her, belittled her, even struck their youngest child. When they came to America, Sheyla believed distance could heal what was broken. But abuse doesn't end with geography. It follows, hides, and waits for the right moment to strike again. Her friends began noticing subtle changes. Her once bright laughter dulled. Her eyes grew distant. She became quieter, careful with her words. Elizabeth Rousseau, one of her closest friends, would later tell investigators that Sheyla felt trapped. Josemar had threatened her, promising that if she ever tried to leave, he would take the children away. That fear kept her tethered to him long after love had died. Yet even in that shadow, Sheyla remained kind. She still helped her neighbors. She still talked about her dreams, about the day she and her sons would finally be free. It was that dream that gave her courage. By the summer of 2025, Sheyla made her decision. The fear was still there, but the hope was louder. She began saving money in secret, whispering plans to friends she trusted, quietly preparing to file for divorce. On August 9th, she called her parents in Peru. Her voice trembled, but there was strength beneath it. "I'm leaving him," she said. "Tomorrow I'm going to police." It would be the last time her mother ever heard her daughter's voice. Inside the apartment, the air had shifted. It was heavy, thick with something that felt wrong, though no one outside could sense it. Josemar Cabrera knew what was coming. He could feel it in the way Sheyla avoided his eyes, in the way she moved through their home like a woman already halfway gone. To him, losing control was an option. If she left his world, his power would crumble. Neighbors would later say he seemed withdrawn in those final days. Quiet, brooding, the kind of silence that warns of a storm before it hits. And that storm came in the early hours of August 10th, 2025. While their 3 children slept in the next room, small bodies curled under blankets, safe in their dreams, a horror unfolded just a few feet away. The details of what happened next are buried in sealed court documents, but what investigators piece together paints a picture too chilling to forget. Authorities believe that Josemar Cabrera murdered his wife, using a knife in an act of deliberate, controlled violence. This wasn't a burst of rage. It was premeditated, calculated, cold. By the time the first rays of sunlight touched Lancaster Boulevard, Sheyla's laughter, the sound that once filled that small home, was gone, and in its place, a silence so complete it seemed to swallow the entire room. Her children would awaken to a world forever changed. The woman who had tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and promised to keep them safe was gone, taken by the one person they trusted protect her. The apartment that had once been a sanctuary now held only echoes of struggle, of heartbreak, of betrayal. When it was over, Josemar didn't panic. He didn't scream. He moved with eerie calm, as if each step had already been rehearsed in his mind. Investigators later said his actions that night showed disturbing precision. He wrapped Sheyla's body in a large piece of fabric, folding and binding it tightly, not with the chaos of guilt, but with the method of someone who had planned for this moment. That same fabric would later become the evidence that broke the case open. A silent witness captured in the grainy lens of a doorbell camera. Neighbors remembered faint sounds in the darkness, doors closing softly, something being dragged, then the low rumble of a car engine. Nothing loud, nothing alarming, just enough to stir the stillness of the night. Around 2:40 a.m., a neighbor returning home from a late shift saw something strange. The complex was quiet, every window dark, except one man standing beside his silver sedan, cleaning the trunk. At that hour, it made no sense, but she shrugged it off and went inside. She had no idea she had just witnessed the start of a cover-up. Hours later, detectives would confirm what that moment truly was. A man preparing to erase his crime. From a nearby Ring doorbell camera, a black and white image emerged, time-stamped 4 a.m. A shadowed figure dragged a heavy, fabric-wrapped object across the pavement, struggling to lift it. It was unmistakable. That object was Sheyla Cabrera. The footage became the beating heart of the investigation. Cold, irrefutable proof of what had really happened inside that home. Moments later, the figure forced a bundle into the trunk of a car, closed the lid, and drove into the darkness. His route led him away from Lancaster, up through the winding roads that snaked toward the Angeles National Forest, more than 700,000 acres of canyons and wilderness. By day, the forest is peaceful, but at night, it becomes something else, a place where the lost stay lost, where secrets are buried beneath stone and pine. There, hidden from the world, Josemar found his spot. He opened the trunk, pulled the bundle out, and with no hesitation, pushed it over the edge. Her body tumbled down through the brush and rocks, coming to rest in the cold darkness below. The woman he once vowed to love, the mother of his children, was left alone in the wilderness, discarded like she never existed. When it was done, Josemar drove home in silence. Back inside the apartment, his son still slept soundly, unaware that their mother would never return. By morning, the sun rose over Lancaster Boulevard as if nothing had happened. But inside that small apartment, death lingered, invisible yet everywhere, and the man responsible was already preparing his next move. The lies. 2 days passed, and with each silent hour, worry began to spread like a slow infection through Sheyla's circle of friends. By August 12th, 2025, the unease had turned to panic. No one had heard from her. No texts, no calls, no updates. Sheyla was the kind of person who always checked in, especially about her children. To vanish without a word wasn't just strange. It was impossible. Her friends knew something was wrong. That morning, a small group went to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to file a missing person report. Deputies were sent to Sheyla's apartment on Lancaster Boulevard. When the door opened, Josemar Cabrera stood there, calm, composed, polite, almost too polite. At first, he played the part of the worried husband. He told officers that Sheyla had been detained by immigration authorities, a calculated lie meant to exploit fear and bureaucracy. But detectives had heard stories like that before. When they pressed him for details, his story began to crumble. He changed it once then again. Now, he said Sheyla had left him for another man. Later, he claimed she'd been in an accident, though he couldn't say where or when or with whom. Each new version contradicted the last. Every word felt rehearsed but hollow, like a man building walls out of sand. Investigators exchanged glances. They weren't talking to a grieving husband. They were looking at someone hiding something. As the hours turned into days, friends of Sheyla began coming forward with stories that filled in the blanks. Stories that cut through Josemar's lies like glass. They spoke about the abuse, the threats, the years of fear she endured in silence. They told detectives how she planned to leave him, how she promised to go to the police, and how terrified she'd been of what he might do if he found out. The image Josemar had worked so hard to maintain, the smiling family man, the gentle father, began to crack wide open. Detectives no longer saw a missing person case. They saw a cover-up. They saw murder. They started digging into everything. Phone records, surveillance cameras, traffic footage near the Cabrera apartment complex. And then on August 13th, just 3 days after Sheyla vanished, everything changed. A neighbor came forward with footage from her Ring doorbell camera. The timestamp for AM August 10th. In the grainy black and white image, a figure struggled to drag a large object wrapped in fabric. The same kind of material later found missing from Sheyla's apartment. The man strained under its weight before forcing it into the trunk of his car. That single clip shattered every lie he had told. The case transformed instantly from a search for a missing woman to a homicide investigation. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau took over immediately. Search and rescue teams from Crescenta Valley, Altadena, and Montrose joined in, combing through the Angeles National Forest. Over 700,000 acres of rugged cliffs, canyons, and dense brush. Finding her, there would be like finding a whisper in a hurricane, but they refused to stop. Meanwhile, a chilling new realization set in. Josemar and the couple's 3 young sons were now missing too. Fearing he had fled the country, U.S. authorities began coordinating with the Mexican and Peruvian consulates. An international alert was issued. Leads began surfacing. Sightings along highways, border towns, even airports. Each one a ghost trail just behind him. For nearly a week, investigators chased rumors across borders, knowing that every hour mattered. Then, on the morning of August 16th, a call came through the radio, the kind of call detectives both hoped for and dread. Members of the Montrose Mountain Search and Rescue Team had spotted something down a steep embankment in a remote corner of the forest. Wrapped in fabric, motionless. When homicide detectives arrived, they climbed carefully down to the rocks and brush. What they found that would confirm their worst fears. The bundle matched the one seen in the Ring footage, and inside it was Sheyla Cabrera. She was just 33 years old. The forest was silent as the detectives stood over her, the wind whispering through the trees, the only sound breaking the stillness. The woman who had come to America seeking safety had been found in a place of isolation and death. Word spread fast through Lancaster's Peruvian community. By sunset, candles began to flicker on street corners. People brought flowers, handwritten notes, photographs of Sheyla smiling with her children. Some prayed. Others simply stood in silence, faces lit by candlelight. Across the city, the same phrase echoed again and again. Justice for Sheyla. But justice still had a long way to go, because somewhere far away, the man responsible was still running. After fleeing the United States, Josemar Cabrera began a desperate run across borders. A man haunted by what he'd done and hunted by the truth that followed him. He crossed into Mexico, traveling by land to avoid detection, keeping the back roads and quiet border towns. He stayed in small hostels, using cash, never lingering long enough for anyone to remember his face. He thought he could outrun justice. But the shadows of what he'd done clung to him like smoke. He was detained twice, once in Mexico and later in Peru, questioned, identified, and then released. Each time, he slipped through the cracks of bureaucracy, Formal charges hadn't yet been filed in the U.S., meaning no country could legally hold him. For investigators, it was agony, knowing exactly who he was, what he'd done, and still being forced to watch him walk free. When Josimar finally landed at Jorge Chavez International Airport in Lima, Peru, local authorities were waiting. He was stopped and questioned, and the 3 small children traveling with him were taken into protective custody. But once again, without an official extradition order, the man suspected of killing his wife walked away a free man, leaving his sons behind in the hands of child welfare officials. For a brief, unbearable moment, it seemed the killer had escaped. Then something shifted. News of Sheyla's murder began spreading through both the United States and Peru, across social media, radio, television. People were outraged. How could man accused of such horror be free, while the woman he killed was mourned thousands of miles away? The Peruvian Foreign Ministry and U.S. consular officials intervened, ensuring that Sheyla's children were safe. Within days, they were flown from Lima to Los Angeles, where they were reunited with their grandmother, Helga Rosillo. For Helga, it was a reunion that broke her heart. 3 little boys back in her arms, their mother gone forever. Meanwhile, across the ocean, justice was gathering strength. Detectives in Los Angeles compiled a mountain of evidence. The surveillance footage, witness statements, forensic data, and years of domestic violence reports. On August 21st, the case file landed on the desk of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's office. Hours later, prosecutors announced a single devastating charge. 1 count of murder, with a special allegation of using a knife as a deadly weapon. An extradition warrant was signed the next morning. Interpol issued a red notice, the international equivalent of a manhunt siren, flashing across databases and borders in real time. From that moment on, Josimar Cabrera was no longer a missing husband. He was a fugitive wanted for murder. Reports out of Peru described the search as relentless. Agents traced his movements along the Pan American Highway, combing through bus terminals, hotels, and border towns. His photo was everywhere, flickering across news broadcasts and Interpol bulletins, his face paired with one word: wanted. For nearly 2 weeks, he evaded capture, but the pressure mounted. Every safe place disappeared, every contact burned. He had nowhere left to run. On August 27, 2025, the chase finally ended. Josimar Cabrera walked into Interpol headquarters in Lima and surrendered. Footage released later showed the moment of his arrest. A man in a black shirt, wrists cuffed, his head bowed as officers let him past flashing cameras. There was no fight left in him, only emptiness. The same emptiness he had left behind in Lancaster. According to Peruvian officials, he remains in custody as the extradition process moves forward, a slow, methodical journey through courtrooms and diplomatic channels. But it's only a matter of time before he faces the justice he tried to escape. If convicted, Josimar Cabrera faces a maximum sentence of 26 years to life in a California prison. For Sheyla's family, the waiting continues, a long, painful road toward closure. But after months of heartbreak, there is hope again. Hope that the woman who came to America seeking peace will finally be given the justice she deserves. Hope that her 3 sons will grow up knowing that their mother's courage mattered. That even in her final moments, she fought to break free. A story of love turned to fear, of silence turned to tragedy, and of a community that refused to let her memory fade into the dark. Because sometimes, even when a voice is silenced, its echo lingers. And those echoes are what keep the truth alive. Justice may take years, but the echoes of what happened that night will never fade. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Echoes of the Past, where the shadows of yesterday still whisper their truths.